Hello, my name's Eric. I'm talking with famous people, and we're looking at argument stuff tonight because I made this document but didn't finish making the video because I basically fell asleep. I was almost falling asleep in the chair here while I was doing it, so I was like, fuck this noise, and I went to bed. Anyway, non-arguments and other ways to lose is the title of this section. Comprised of sentences for us to look at. That's not realistic. What you're saying, Eric, it's not realistic. Well, that's not a response to anything, right? If you're saying it's different than what I think is normal, that's not an explanation for not realistic. You got to be somewhat more specific about the realism of something. But again, also note that I'm advocating how things ought to be. So if you agree that's how it ought to be, but you're saying that it's not realistic, then the question becomes, do you mean there's no reason to work towards it because we can't affect that change? Because at this point it sounds to me as though you're justifying inaction in the face of a clear path. Okay. B. Well, I'm no authority, but the people who really know about this, the experts, they can explain it. Those pesky experts, I tell you, they're always sharing their expertise with us about things. I love it so much when experts come talk to me about things about which they're experts. Oh my God, you're such an expert on that. You are such an expert on being darling. Well, I'm no authority, but experts can explain it. Well, you're the one making the claim. So why are you saying now that you don't really know why you're making that? You don't know why your claim is true, but experts do know. And so what you're saying is still true. It's just, it's a truth known by somebody other than you. Which is really ridiculous thing. You think about it, right? This is true, Eric. A is true. No, it's not. A is bullshit. Here's the reason why, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, A is true. Somebody else knows why. Well, what makes you think it's true then, if you don't know why? Why are you asserting its truth? I just don't understand that exactly, but a black and white view on things never works. We should never smash a baby's face in with a hammer because the baby's crying too much. You want to make some exceptions? You want to say, well, I mean, but if it's really annoying. It's a ridiculous sentence, right? A black and white view on things never works. It's a very black and white view on things. And you hear this, people say things like this. Of course, we can come up with plenty of examples of situations where a black and white view on things does work. And it's harder to come up with examples of things where a black and white view on things doesn't work. You can come up with specific black and white views that don't work, but don't mistake the individual for a member of the class. I mean, the individual for the class. So just because an individual is a member of the class doesn't mean that the class has to share all the attributes of the individual. Right? Just because that guy likes cheese doesn't mean all guys like cheese. So the problem with your position is that people advocating that side of things. The problem with your position is that people advocating that side don't care about X and care instead about Y. I'm not those people. And I'm not advocating a side. I'm advocating a position, a statement, an assertion, a course of action that we got to take, something specific. You associate it with a side and then say, I don't like that side, therefore I oppose your position. And that is exactly why you're wrong, because that's how you decide things. These responses I'm giving you right here are responses you need to be making. All people in the world, everybody, when you hear this shit. I hate this shit. I've shown you multiple studies proving A, and you've shown no evidence at all, Eric. Obviously, I'm right here and you're just being stubborn. Not necessarily. There are some evidence-based arguments that are just completely bullshit. Depends on the kind of evidence you're presenting me. And it depends on what I'm claiming. I'm not necessarily wrong or stubborn. I could be not claiming anything and just disputing your claim and point out that you failed to meet any adequate burden of proof. I don't need to have evidence of that. You're the one with the burden. You're the one making the claim. Right? Okay. F. By not ascribing to a specific metric, I can make decisions better because I won't be limited by looking at it through one perspective. No. By not ascribing to a specific metric, and by not understanding which metrics you ascribe to in the status quo by default, in which context, you guarantee that you are having a limited perspective. Because you're guaranteeing that you don't have a meta framework to explain why actually a given framework is preferable over another. If you do the work there, you might come up with a system that says, well, I ascribe to this metric in this situation, this metric in this situation. But you wouldn't say, oh, I don't ascribe to a specific metric on a situational basis like that, because what that means is I always go with my default metric, which is either it could be like based on my mood, based on my feelings, based on the thing, but I don't even really know what it is because I haven't thought about this before. What they're basically saying is I reject the absolutist claim that individuals ought to resolve these matters internally before behaving as though they have. That'll never work. Well, that's not an argument. If you're agreeing with me in principle on something, that means you are correct, Eric. This is the moral action. On that grounds, you're correct. Now, I oppose your claim that we have to be moral. It's impossible for people to be moral. So we have to be more immoral. It's weird. I'm starving. I gotta go to Denny's. My car's battery is dead. I forgot. It's not the political will to get that done. Again, I'm saying what we ought to do. And if you agree that it's what we ought to do, and the problem is a lack of political will, well, to the extent that you're going to direct any energies towards a political outcome, why would you ever want to direct your energies towards an outcome that's not what we ought to do? It's not fair that some people are X and others are Y. Fairness does not refer to a state of being. It refers to actions taken by people. So, an individual can be unfair, and we might refer to certain systems or states of affairs or status quo descriptions of reality as fair or unfair. But of course, they can't be. They can't be fair or unfair because that doesn't get to mean anything on a non-individuated basis. The reason is fairness is an issue of moral agency. We might say something ridiculous like, it's not fair that it rained today because this was the day I was planning on a picnic. But we don't really mean that, I would hope. We'd note that, well, of course it's fair because it's the same for everybody. The same mechanism, the same rules. Now, it's fair that it rained today when I was going to go on my picnic because it's impossible to imagine that unfairness was perpetrated. And that's what must happen before unfairness comes into being, is it has to be perpetrated. And unfairness. And unfairness can only be perpetrated by a moral agent. Somebody must have the capacity to be fair in order to be unfair. There has to be some sort of judgment rendered. States of affairs, like, well, it's not fair that there are rich people and poor people. That's like saying, well, that banana's not a good singer. It's asserting implicitly that it could be a singer. It is a singer, in fact, but not a good one. But it's not a singer at all. Some people will try to argue, oh, well, see, this shows you why logic's no good. I could point out that, I could say that banana's not a good singer. It's a true sentence. And then I could just point out logically that things that are not people that are not good singers, non-good singers sing badly, and you've just proved, my friend, with logic that that banana's singing. I think that shows you why logic breaks down. No, you're making a fucking category error. You're making a category error. It's that simple. If you want to talk about fairness or unfairness, talk about that particular guy in the commission of his duties as whatever, an agent of a company or an individual or the government or whatever. He performed a behavior that comprised an unfairness. That is how we can think about fairness meaningfully. Here's an interesting one. Enlightenment liberates one from the self. Liberates who now? Me? So once I'm out, I'm liberated. Does that me get liberated from another self, or what? Because the thing that I've been liberated from still seems to be attached to me, namely the identity that makes it possible for me to have sufficient distinction to become anything, including enlightened. It's all predicated on distinction. So, any notion of a spiritual attainment that is more meaningful or real than simple happy achievement in life is absurd. Without the self, you'd not have any cause to be altruistic. There'd be no kindness, no love, no generosity, no villains to blame. If you think it's a good idea to go back before we ate the apple, you're crazy. You don't want that kind of paradise. And because people who look similar often share ancestry, race is a meaningful distinction. It's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. There's no possible reason whatsoever to think that race is a real thing, like biologically or genetically, in the way that, I don't know, sex is, like biological sex. Sex is real, race is not. They say race is a social construct. Well, they should call it something else. a popular wrong justification for bullshit. Whatever it is. Let's help them, let's hurt them, let's whatever. They don't fucking exist. There's some person. There's some individual person. And they might choose to call themselves a given race if they want to. But, I mean, they can change that every day if they want. I've already proved you can do that. I've changed my race multiple times. Because a population of people experience similar difficulties, ADHD is a disorder. No, it's not. Same fucking thing. Except there's even less commonality between people who are supposedly of the same race than there is between ADHD people. We're much more common with each other than any inter-race thing, any inter-race commonality anyone could ever even dream up. It's ridiculous. But the ADHD thing, we are similar to one another. Because here's what they do. They go, okay, first let's gather a population of people who all tell us that they have similar problems with attention and stuff like that, and blah, 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 following through and whatever. Let's gather all these people together with the same basic complaints about life. And let's do a study where we show that all these people have the complaints that they said they had. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. Yep. Proof, guys. It's proof. These people come in through these ADHD clinics, and we see time and again the people who are hyper and easily bored and impatient and stuff like that. Consistently, time and again, when we examine them, they are, in fact, hyper, consistently bored and impatient. Well, yeah, that's interesting. And what makes this a disorder? The fact that there's going to be a percentage of the population with who's bad at that shit at the bottom of the bell curve. Doesn't that just make us bad at it? Is it a disorder that I can't turn furniture to get through a doorway very well? I'm very bad at that. Does that make it a disorder? I'm bad at lots of shit. Can they all be disorders? I'm going to make a list of everything I'm bad at, and I'm going to make them all disorders. People are too complex in their consciousness to be meaningfully described by types. Bullshit. They're too complex in their consciousness to not be meaningfully described by types. because we need to have some way of narrowing this down. It's so complicated, right? Understanding human beings, the way they think, why they decide this. What in the world was that person thinking? People say that kind of stuff all the time because we don't understand each other. We don't understand why we're different from each other. Well, one way to say it is we got different perspectives. And you go, wow, that doesn't explain. That's not what this personality thing is. Yeah, it's it. And that they habitually happen in certain ratio, certain frequencies. And number two, that some of them are mutually exclusive of other ones. So that's it. I know, really horoscopy, huh? My friend Corey wants, like, he's determined this is the angle of attack he's gonna go. Horoscopy shit. Well, Corey, I mean, you don't know anything about it. We should only consider cognitive functions real if we find proof of a physical correlate in the brain. That's not what a cognitive function is. It's a manner of attention. A manner of attention. You can attend to things in different ways. I could look at somebody, a group of people, and say, let me focus specifically on what they're doing emotionally to each other. And it's not going to be very interesting for very long to me exactly. It's kind of a weird thing. But, or I could say, let me think about the, architectural stability of this room. And, let me reverse engineer in my head right now why they laid the tiles like this, or how they laid it, probably, or how the tiles came to be like this. I mean, you could say, let me just experience a nice warm sun sitting right here. It's perfect. Well, I do all those things sometimes. Probably. You do most of those things at some point. Maybe not. The reverse engineering of the tile thing. Well, see, I mean, that's just a matter of smartness. No, actually, if you consistently choose lying in the sun, and you consistently choose that massage and whatever else, and you're not that interested in fancy stuff, it doesn't just mean that. It doesn't just mean, I'm just not that interested in fancy stuff. It means you are actively prioritizing some other kind of thing, and that you can be predictable in some ways. Everybody can. Anyway, let's go to the next thing. Evidence-driven arguments are superior. No, they're not. They're not. First of all, the evidence people use is, it never proves, almost never proves the thing they're trying to say. Almost never. You're much more likely to successfully prove something one way or the other without a lot of evidence, because most of the real arguments are, to the extent that you want to really talk about the subject, you have to talk about it at a level before then. You can't say, well, should we spend our tax dollars on this or that? Well, here's some utilitarian impacts for this plan, here's some utilitarian impacts for this plan, what should we do? If you want to answer those things on that contention level, that's fine, but it's not actually addressing the issue. The actual issue is the assumptions being made that are not being acknowledged by the other person debating. And so it's like a teaching thing where you got to sit there and explain it all to them. And they don't want to accept that you're right. They just want to argue more, and that's fine, but they don't understand. You are not citing any evidence, I should say. So it's just your opinion. First of all, I hate that word, opinion. I hate it. It's not meaningful. It's not a meaningful distinction. My opinion is either factually true, logically true, factually false, logically false. My opinion has a status associated with it. It's not just my opinion. My opinion is an opinion that exists independent of me. And some opinions are correct and some opinions are not correct. So it doesn't matter if something's an opinion or not. It's irrelevant in discussing the truth of the thing. It's a ridiculous word. It's meaningless. As far as making a purposeful distinction, host Eric's just being stubborn. He just doesn't want to lose. It's not true. It's not true. You're making the wrong arguments. I have been stubborn sometimes. I mean, occasionally I get stubborn. But that's not why 99% of the time. If you are actually threatening me, I'm much more likely to get silly than I am to get stubborn. I get stubborn when you are not being responsive. That's what is perceived as stubbornness. When people won't answer questions or won't address actual points I made and stuff like that, but still want to insist they're right. To really understand why it's so important to agree with my position Z, you have to have life experience G. Then I don't agree with your position Z, and nobody else should either, because the thing you're proposing applies to everybody. So why should only those who've had certain life experiences get to understand why we have to do it? I mean, I can have some secret reasons too why. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, we are removing your left arm. Well, you say it's a host Eric thing. You wouldn't understand. You got to be named host Eric to understand. It's a secret thing. Yeah, we got secret reasons. They're very important though. You just have to trust me on that. Obeying the law is good. Obeying the law sometimes correlates with the good, sometimes not. The good is not related to the law. There's no default that, well, unless you have a good reason not to break the law, you really should follow the law. No, absolutely not. You should behave as a moral agent behaves, in coordination with one's moral directive. From whence comes that is a trickier question. But we know the law can't give it to us because it's wrong all the fucking time. For one reason. It's saying, "Oh, well, I can't tell if I should shoot this guy or not. I don't know my own moral agency. Morality is confusing to me. If they're screaming, is that a good thing again? Well, yeah, she's sobbing and begging for her life and stuff. Moral or not? No? Oh, I had it backwards? My bad. I should have looked at the law. That would tell me. Why would we think a group of people compromising their way to a coercive protocol would better know than an individual what's right and wrong? It's crazy. But if we don't do K, people L will experience lack. You don't know people L, and you're assuming solvency. Whatever K is, there's no reason to believe it's going to work. You haven't given us one. You've described the problem, and then you've said, here's doing something. You haven't factored in where the money's coming from. You haven't determined anything about the justice angle of that. And whatever it is, that we're currently doing, if it is stopped, people will manifest their own lives. You don't get to tell them how they're going to fail after you stop coddling them. V. There are lots of ways to argue, Eric. Yours is just one. There's no reason to think it's necessarily better than any other. Nope. We're all arguing the same way. There's only one way to argue. We exchange statements. You either agree with them or you don't. You say why you don't agree with them. Your reason either withstands scrutiny or it doesn't. Same thing everybody else does. All people argue. My way is not different. It's just doing it right. Other people argue like, well, I mean, it's tragic. It's tragic. How can we have a country run by people who wouldn't last 5 minutes in a GoToMeeting room if they were actually put under scrutiny on their positions, actually asked to be pinned down, actually had to answer questions, were actually willing to stay there and be held accountable for their contradictions? I mean, they'd run screaming. They don't know why they advocate what they do, except that that's what people seem to like, and they have some sort of fucking flimsy words that they've not really thought through, and yeah. Corporations don't or do care about people. Again, category error. Corporations don't have feelings. Reification fallacy. Social contract says a social contract is bullshit because it's not a contract. Contracts are consensual agreements. College increases your wealth. Maybe if you aim really low and you hope to be a more well-compensated wage slave than a less well-compensated wage slave, after about 30 years and you pay off all the investment it took to pay for the college, then yes, a little bit. Of course, if you ditch that notion and try to actually think about money and wealth as what it is, which is an exchange of value to people for value from people. So that's simple. College is to respect individuals equally. You must respect the ways and ideas of their people as fundamentally equal to your own. I say I treat them fundamentally equally to the way I treat the ideas and ways of my own people. I subject them to scrutiny, and if they are bullshit, I call bullshit on them. To disrespect, in my opinion, it's pretty simple. If you want to disrespect a Muslim, refuse to tell them the truth to their face about what you think about their ways. Or, if you want to disrespect them, tell them that even though you would strongly oppose those ways for yourself, you don't believe actually in your ways at all as being better, just better for me. Okay, well, what if their ways and your ways conflict, and you can't have both. Which one do you choose? Well, my ways, of course. Well, their ways say that they should get to force you to be their ways. So, as long as they don't succeed, they're still equal, but if they succeed, then they're not equal anymore? Then they're better? Or what? Well, they're not going to do that. See, that's the kind of Islamophobia I'm talking about. No. The point being this. We cannot mistake individuals for the groups that they're in. We just can't. So, if we do, we are playing make-believe and failing to know that's what we're doing. Obviously, I'm strongly opposed to Islam as a phenomenon, a social phenomenon. And I'm opposed to it because it is deeply opposed to the individual. It's deeply opposed to liberty. It's deeply opposed to women. So, I know, though, that individual human beings can surprise the shit out of you and remind you never to mistake individuals for their groups. First of all, remember also that most of the group ideas that you have in your head, like the ones I have in my head, are individuated to me or you. They're not actually descriptive of the group. They're descriptive of ourselves, really. But we have to know that that's what makes our ways better. When they're the right our ways, is that they empower individuals to express themselves in multiple ways and peacefully coexist alongside each other, despite the fact that one party is yelling about how awful they are, when the other party is, well, engaged in systemically awful behavior. So, they're not the other party. That's not a party, right? It's not an individual. This religion. So, what about the individuals then? Well, I mean, they are part of the religion. They make up the religion. You got to do something about them too, don't you, Eric? Or else you're just blowing smoke. Well, no, exactly not. I'm saying, like, Widad comes around occasionally and writes another comment and is, in my opinion, a stunningly important person in my life because she reminds me that these people who ascribe to this religion that I say is anti-free expression, anti-individualism, and anti-women has produced a woman intellectual who's engaged in my media despite the fact that I'm bad-mouthing the shit out of a religion. It kind of disproves my central thesis in a way. I mean, I don't think it disproves the thesis actually, but it reinforces the other thesis, which is that don't mistake people for the groups. Widad is an individual human being and a Muslim woman and an enlightened thinker and somebody who respects individualism enough to watch these videos, even though there are certainly some of them which she must, I would imagine, disagree and feel even offended by. And but here's the other great thing about individualism. I'm able to both have all that respect that I do for Widad and also maintain my consistent beliefs about her religion. it's not contradictory. Why isn't it contradictory, Eric? Because individuals aren't groups, and judging a set of protocols, which is what Islam basically is, for its primitive manifestations, well, that's very different than saying, I hate Muslims. I don't hate Muslims. I hate Islam. Okay? And I should hate Islam, and so should you. If you're a Westerner like me and not Widad, you go ahead and continue not hating Islam. But if you're a Westerner like me, you should hate Islam, but don't hate Widad. Well, but Eric, you're advocating stopping Islamic immigration into the country. I know. I'm glad she's in Canada. It makes it fun. It makes it easy for me to talk to her and not have to worry about that. Right? I'll cross that argument bridge when I get to it. Leave me alone. Thanks for watching Talking with Fast People.